He gave his only jacket to a freezing woman, but had no idea she was a billionaire CEO in disguise. What started as a simple act of kindness turned into a life-altering test of character, and David never saw it coming. David was just a regular guy, struggling to make ends meet, working double shifts, living in a run-down apartment. Yet, on that freezing night, when most would have walked past, he stopped. He noticed her, shivering, silent, invisible to the world. Without thinking twice, he wrapped his own jacket around her shoulders. No questions, no expectations, just kindness. But what David didn't know was that the woman he helped wasn't just cold. She was watching. She had power, influence, and a secret mission of her own. And this one moment, it would set off a chain of events that would turn David's quiet life upside down. She vanished without a name, only to return days later, not as a stranger, but as his new boss. And that's when the real test began. She gave him an opportunity most dream of, but also a challenge most would fail. Would David's heart stay true when tempted by wealth, success, and secrets? Or would everything he stood for crumble when the truth was finally revealed? Stay with us till the end, because what this woman did next will leave you speechless. The wind sliced through New York like a blade that night, sharp and unforgiving. Snow drifted steadily from a colorless sky, blanketing the sidewalks in silence, muffling the city's usual roar. Under a flickering street lamp at a nearly empty bus stop stood Henry Miles, shoulders hunched inside a thinning olive green jacket. He held a warm manila folder tight against his chest. Inside it, 5 resumes, 5 unanswered hopes. He exhaled, the cold air turning his breath to mist. Henry was 46, once a construction engineer, a widower, a father, and for now, homeless. That last word settled heavy in his chest, just like the snow piling around his boots. Across the street, the red glow of a pharmacy sign blinked 8:41 p.m. The bus was late, again, and the cold had found its way through the soles of his old boots. Then she appeared. She looked out her place in this bitter night, early 30s maybe, dressed for a boardroom, not a blizzard. A pencil skirt, light blouse, high heels, no coat. Her damp hair clung to her cheeks, arms wrapped around herself as she hurried beneath the awning, heels tapping against wet pavement. She was shivering, clearly trying to warm her bare hands by rubbing them together. Henry noticed. How couldn't he? She looked sharp, professional, and freezing. He looked away. Another cold night, another bus to nowhere. But then the wind shrieked down the street, and she flinched, folded into herself like she might shatter. Henry's eyes met his again. That jacket of his wasn't worth much, but it was something. He could keep it, stay quiet, be like everyone else who looked the other way. But he didn't. Without saying a word, he shrugged off the jacket and stepped toward her. The cold hit his skin like needles. He held it out. She blinked, startled. You don't have to do that. Henry gave her a tired half-smile. I've already lost enough today. This coat, well, it's about the only thing I've got left to give. She hesitated. But you need it more than I do. He didn't argue. He simply draped it over her shoulders. Not tonight. The warmth surprised her. It smelled faintly of soap and coffee. Familiar. Safe. She pulled it tight around herself, almost without realizing. Thank you, she murmured. Henry nodded, folding his arms across his chest for warmth. They stood like that for a while, silent as the snow fell heavy around them. Then she toned slightly. What's your name? Henry. I'm Claire. Nice to meet you, Claire. She looked him over. You really shouldn't have given me your jacket. He chuckled softly. Probably not, but I couldn't just let you freeze. The rumble of an approaching bus broke the quiet. Headlights cut through the snow. Claire stepped forward toward the curb, then stopped. She turned back. Do you have somewhere to go? Henry shrugged, eyes down. Somewhere, he said, not mentioning the rusted old truck behind a warehouse that waited for him. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, handing it to him, in case you ever need something. He took it, sliding it into his folder without looking. He'd heard that line before. Most people never meant it. Claire stepped onto the bus, glanced back once, jacket wrapped tight around her like borrowed armor. Henry watched the bus disappear into the snowfall. Alone again. But he wasn't shivering from the cold anymore. Something deeper stirred inside him. Small, quiet, unfamiliar. He looked up at the sky, then down the empty street. Maybe tomorrow, he whispered, then turned and walked into the night. The doorman greeted her with a polite nod, but Claire barely noticed. Her heels clicked softly on the marble as she crossed the lobby, still wrapped tight in the coat a stranger had handed her without hesitation. She hadn't meant to take it. She'd tried to refuse. But Henry, yes, he'd said his name was Henry, had looked at her with such quiet resolve, it had left no room for argument. So now here she was, stepping into the elevator of a glass and steel high-rise, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big and worn thin at the elbows. And yet, it was warmer than anything she'd worn in years. The elevator rose silently to the 28th floor. When the doors opened, Claire stepped into her penthouse apartment. No music, no television, just a low hum of modern appliances and the faint howl of wind beyond thick glass walls. Everything in its place. Sleek, spotless, cold. She dropped her purse onto the console table and slowly peeled the jacket from her shoulders. As she went to hang it over the back of a chair, her fingers brushed something inside the lining. Curious, she reached into the inner pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was creased and faded, soft at the corners from being held too often. She opened it gently. A child's drawing. Crayon stick figures, a tall one labeled Dad, a smaller one marked Me. A crooked sun beamed above them, and between the two, a floating heart. At the bottom, written in wobbly letters, I love you, Daddy, Noah. Claire froze. She stared at the drawing, the words blurring before her eyes. Her breath caught. Her knees gave out just enough that she dropped onto the edge of her velvet couch, the jacket in one hand, the picture in the other. Noah. The name clung to her like a shadow. She thought of Henry again, the way he had held that folder like it carried the last pieces of his life. The worn-out smile. The ache behind his eyes. This hadn't been some act of politeness. Henry wasn't just a kind stranger. He was a father, a man who had next to nothing, but still chose to give the only warm thing he owned to a freezing woman he didn't know. She looked around her apartment, the high ceilings, glass walls, minimalist furniture, designer everything. It was immaculate, impressive, lifeless. There wasn't a single photo on the shelves. No clutter. No mess, no memories, just space meant for success. Claire folded the crayon drawing and laid it on her lap. Then, without thinking, she hugged the old jacket to her chest. It smelled faintly of something, laundry soap, maybe, or coffee, or memory. Tears rose before she could stop them. She hadn't cried in years. Not really. Not since she was a little girl, sitting on the cold stone steps of a church, hoping anyone would notice her. Someone had. A man with gentle eyes and a weathered face had knelt in front of her that day and wrapped his coat around her shoulders. He hadn't said much, just smiled and told her she'd be okay. She never saw him again, but that single act of kindness had changed everything. Now, tonight, it had happened again. She sniffed and wiped her cheek. She wasn't that little girl anymore. She had clawed her way out of the system, earned scholarships, built her future brick by digital brick. Infinity Group, the empire she'd founded, was now a tech powerhouse on the East Coast. She had earned every dollar, every title, every inch of respect. But somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten how it felt to need, and more importantly, how it felt to give. Henry had reminded her. She looked at the drawing again, at the tiny heart between 2 stick figures, at the coat lying in her lap, threadbare and precious. And for the first time in a long, long time, Claire Langston wept. Not because she was broken, but because something inside her had cracked open, softly, beautifully. The next morning, Claire sat at her sleek desk in her corner office, untouched coffee growing cold beside her. Beyond the towering windows, Manhattan stretched endlessly in every direction. But her eyes weren't on the view. They were on the drawing, creased and smudged from being folded and unfolded all night. She hadn't slept. Not really. All she saw was Henry, standing in the snow, holding out his only coat with that same tired dignity, as if giving it away was the most natural thing in the world. There had been pain in his voice, but grace in his silence. She reached into her drawer and rang the silver bell. Seconds later, her assistant stepped in. "Yes, Miss Langston. I need your help finding someone." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Of course. Who?" Claire paused for just a breath. "His name is Henry. I don't know his last name. He was at the bus stop on 56 in Madison last night, around 8:30. He gave me his coat." Rachel blinked, surprised, but didn't question it. "I'll see what I can do." And Rachel, this stays between us. The days that followed turned quiet concern into quiet action. Her team, normally experts at tracking down road coders and rival CEOs, were now working in reverse, tracing the faint footprint of a man who didn't want to be found. They pulled camera footage from nearby intersections, a blurred figure in a fraying coat. They reviewed bus logs, matched timelines, scanned databases. Nothing, until Rachel came back, days later, holding a thin manila file. "His name's Henry Miles," she said. "He was a structural engineer. No recent work history. I found some forum posts. He's been asking about job openings. Used a prepaid number. No permanent address." Claire opened the folder. Inside, a copy of an old driver's license, a frozen LinkedIn profile, an expired construction license. No red flags, no scandals, just silence, just absence. She flipped the final page. Rachel cleared her throat. "One of our drivers spotted him yesterday. South Bronx. There's a truck, beat-up pickup, behind an old warehouse. He's been sleeping there." Claire stood. "I want to go." Rachel hesitated. "Are you sure? We can arrange a meeting. Bring him here." Claire shook her head. "No, this isn't business." Her voice softened. "It's personal." Rachel nodded, her voice low. "I'll have someone drive you." An hour later, Claire sat in the back seat of a sleek black sedan as it wound its way through streets that felt a world away from glass towers and boardroom tables. The city here looked different. Storefronts shuttered behind rusted grates, murals half covered in graffiti, people moving quickly, shoulders hunched against the biting cold. The driver slowed near a warehouse set behind chain-link fencing and snowbanks. Claire spotted the truck immediately, an old Chevy, weathered and tucked deep in the shadows, surrounded by snow that hadn't been disturbed in days. She stepped out into the freezing air. The cold hit her throat like stone. The scent of rust, damp concrete, and something faintly chemical lingered. Her heels crunched over gravel as she made her way toward the truck. Through the frost-glazed windshield, she could see the outline of someone inside. The door creaked open, and Henry stepped out, blinking into the pale morning light. His expression shifted. Confusion, recognition, then something else. Embarrassment. "Claire," he said, his voice rough and groggy. She gave a small smile. "Hi, Henry." He glanced down at his rumpled clothes, at the snow-dusted boots, the old truck behind him. He folded his arms, defensive, guarded. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," she said simply. He frowned, wary. "Why?" She hesitated. Then, with quiet resolve, "Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you did, about the kind of person who gives his only coat to someone he doesn't even know." Henry let out a dry laugh. "You didn't need to track me down for that. A thank you card would have worked just fine." "It's not about thanks," she replied. "It's about not letting something good disappear without being seen." They stood like that for a while. Two people from entirely different lives, bound by a moment on a cold street. Henry exhaled slowly. "So, you came all this way just for that?" Claire nodded. "Yes, and maybe for something more." The next time Claire saw him, he was hunched over a stack of cinder blocks at a construction site on the edge of Queens. She waited in her car for nearly 20 minutes, watching him from a distance. Henry moved with steady rhythm, lifting, stacking, hauling, his breath misting in the air. He wore a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled despite the cold, hands callous and cracked, his movement precise and purposeful. When he finally took a break, perching on a low wall with a plastic water bottle in hand, Claire stepped out of the car and crossed the icy lot. Henry looked up and did a double take. He stood quickly, brushing dust from his pants. "Claire." "Hi again," she said, her smile small but real. "What are you doing here?" She held out a cardboard cup, steam curling from the lid. "Thought you might want something warm." He accepted it cautiously, eyes narrowing as he searched her face. "You really didn't have to." "I know. I wanted to." A beat passed. Then she added, "Would you come with me? Just for a little while. I want to show you something." Henry glanced down at his boots, then over to the foreman in the distance. "I've still got hours left on shift." "I already spoke to him," Claire said. "Told him you had an interview." Henry's brow rose. "I don't have an interview." "You do now," she said. He gave a surprised laugh, short, unsure. "Okay, let's see what this is." They drove in silence. Henry stared out the window, fidgeting, clearly conscious of the dust on his jeans, the sweat on his collar. Claire didn't seem to notice, or care. When they arrived at Infinity Group's headquarters, Henry hesitated just inside the soaring glass lobby. The space buzzed with energy, polished chrome, marble floors, sleek architecture, and the sharp scent of fresh espresso and power. He murmured under his breath, "I don't belong here." "Just come upstairs," Claire said. They entered a private conference room on the top floor. The skyline stretched like a painting outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Claire gestured to a seat. He sat stiffly. She took the one across from him and closed the door. Henry cleared his throat. "So, what is all this? Returning the coat?" Claire shook her head. "No, I'm keeping that," she said, gently smiling. "It's mine now." Henry blinked. "Okay." She leaned in, voice quiet. "I didn't come to thank you, Henry. I came because you made me remember something I'd forgotten. A part of myself I buried under deals and deadlines. You reminded me that change, real change, doesn't always start with ideas or innovation." She tapped the table lightly. "Sometimes it starts with kindness." Henry looked down, uneasy. "Claire, I'm just a guy trying to make it through the day. And that's exactly why I brought you here." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, a job offer, a contract, a new role. Henry picked it up, confused. "What is this?" "A position I created," Claire said. "We don't have anyone like this. A cultural and human values advisor. Someone who joins strategy meetings, product discussions, training sessions, not to talk about revenue or market share, but people, compassion, meaning. You'd help shape the soul of this company." He laughed, a sound more disbelief than humor. "Claire, come on. I don't have a degree in psychology. I didn't go to Harvard. I live in a truck. You were an engineer. I haven't built anything in years." Claire's eyes didn't waver. "You built a moment I'll never forget." Henry opened his mouth, closed it. His fingers hovered over the folder. "This isn't charity," Claire said gently. "This is a job only you can do, because you know what it's like to be invisible, to be overlooked, and still, you gave your only coat to a stranger. That tells me more about leadership than any resume ever could." Henry swallowed. "I'm not qualified." "You don't need a degree to teach people how to care," Claire said, "because you live it every day." Her voice softened. "You don't need credentials to teach kindness, Henry. You just need the courage to show up." Henry looked away, overwhelmed. But something flickered inside him. Not fear, not shame, hope, unfamiliar, raw, terrifying. Later that evening, Henry sat alone on a bench outside the office tower, the job proposal still unopened in his lap. His fingers traced its edges, but his eyes stared out at the traffic, unfocused. He couldn't do it, not because he didn't want to. Deep down, he did, but the fear, old, sharp, familiar, held him tight. The kind of fear that whispered at night, "You're not enough. You never were. She's just being nice. This isn't real. You'll mess it up. You always do." The thoughts came, sharp and familiar. The job offer sat heavy in Henry's lap, like a trap wrapped in kindness. He'd spent years learning to distrust anything that looked too good to be true. And this offer from Claire Miles, of all people, was exactly that. He didn't hear her footsteps until she was already beside him, seated on the bench like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You haven't opened it," she said quietly. Henry gave a dry chuckle. "Didn't think I needed to. I already know how this ends." Claire tilted her head slightly. "How?" He looked straight ahead, jaw tight. "Someone like me doesn't end up in a place like this. You don't build a company like Infinity by hiring people who sleep in trucks. You think I made you an offer out of pity." He shrugged. "I think I don't belong in your world." Claire was silent for a long moment, then stood. "Come with me, just for an hour." "Claire." No suits, no meetings, just trust me. Against every instinct in his body, Henry stood. They drove for over 30 minutes, leaving the high-rises and steel spires of Manhattan behind. The city softened as they moved, growing quieter, slower. Eventually, they pulled up in front of a modest red brick building with a weathered green awning. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Thomas's Place, a safe space for every child." Henry followed Claire inside. The walls were bright, painted with animals, scattered with quotes about kindness, handprints in every color. The scent of crayons and warm bread hung in the air. Down the hall, laughter echoed, pure, high, and unfiltered. Claire led him past a community kitchen, through a cozy reading nook, and into a wide, sunlit playroom. Children sprawled across the floor building puzzles, drawing, reading aloud with too much energy. "This place," Claire said softly, "was named after the man who saved me." Henry turned to her, surprised. "I grew up in foster homes," she continued. "Some were kind, some weren't. One night, I ran away. I was 12. It was freezing. I curled up outside a church, just waiting for morning." She paused. Her voice lowered. "He found me, an old man named Thomas. Gave me his coat. Sat next to me the whole night. Didn't ask questions. Just stayed." Henry swallowed hard. "I never saw him again," she said. "But that moment, someone reaching into the dark and saying, 'You matter,' it stayed. I built this place because of him." She turned fully to Henry. "And last week, someone else gave me a coat. Didn't know who I was. Didn't ask for anything. Just gave." Henry's chest tightened. "You remind me of him," she said. "Not because of what you gave me, but because of who you are." They stood there, surrounded by warmth and laughter and life. Henry's eyes drifted across the room. A volunteer tying a shoelace, a young boy reading aloud with too much drama, a girl offering a crayon to a child beside her. It felt real. It felt like something worth remembering. Claire placed a gentle hand on his arm. "I don't need you to fit into a boardroom. Henry, I need you to remind people of this, of what it means to care." Henry didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat tightened, and the tears came, quiet, unguarded, unstoppable. Not out of sadness, out of relief. For the first time in years, he felt it. He was still needed, still useful, still human. Henry's first day at Infinity Group came without fanfare. No press release. No grand introduction. Just a small meeting in a glass-walled room on the 5th floor, a few skeptical department heads, and a stack of sticky notes. Claire had introduced him simply. "This is Henry Miles. He's here to help us build something more meaningful than just profit." The looks were polite, curious, uncertain. Henry didn't flinch. He shared his story. Not the version trimmed for sympathy or headlines, just pieces. Honest pieces. What it felt like to wake up in a freezing truck. To walk into job interviews knowing your shoes had holes. To choose kindness anyway. At first, they listened with caution. By the end of the week, they leaned in. Henry didn't preach. He didn't perform. He asked questions that made people pause. When was the last time you really looked someone in the eye? Do you know the name of the janitor who cleans this floor? What would you do if you saw someone crying in the break room? No charts, no jargon, just empathy. And slowly, a shift began. One by one, employees started seeking him out. First the interns, then junior developers, eventually department heads. Some came to talk about burnout. Others just sat beside him at lunch, needing the quiet. Henry listened. And when he spoke, he didn't offer answers. He offered perspective. "You're not broken," he once told a young programmer who hadn't slept in 3 days. "You're just tired. Being tired doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've cared for too long without someone caring back." That line ended up taped to office doors, printed on mugs, quoted in all company emails. From a corner office, Claire watched it unfold. She saw how the chatter in the break room changed, how laughter returned, how productivity rose, not because of pressure, but because people finally felt seen. Soon, Henry had an official space of his own. Small, cozy, lined with plants, second-hand books, and a coffee pot that never ran dry. Outside of work, life began to rebuild in quiet, meaningful ways. With Claire's help, and a small housing stipend from Infinity, Henry placed a down payment on a modest one-bedroom in Brooklyn. It had peeling paint and squeaky floorboards, but it also had a porch, a tiny garden plot, and walls that didn't rattle in the wind. Most importantly, it had space for Noah. Now in his first year at a local university, Noah had moved back in with his father. Their first dinner in the new house was simple, spaghetti and garlic bread. But Henry would remember it for the rest of his life. "You kept your promise," Noah had said, voice cracking. Henry hadn't answered, not with words. But the look in his eyes said everything. As for Claire, she and Henry saw each other nearly every day. At first, it was about work, meetings, strategies, building programs that put people first. Then, without trying, it became something more. They started having lunch together, walking to the subway together. And one morning, without meaning to, Claire reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt like they had to. Weekend coffees turned into quiet evenings spent watching old movies, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't fast. It wasn't fireworks. It was real. Two people, once strangers, had spent years building armor around themselves, only to find comfort in someone who didn't ask for anything except presence. One evening, on the rooftop of Infinity Group, as the sun spilled amber light across the skyline, Claire turned to him. "You've changed this place, Henry." He chuckled softly. "No, I just reminded them what they already knew." She smiled. "And you reminded me too." After a resilience workshop, a young man lingered behind, maybe 22 at most. Pale, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. His voice shook. "Last month, I was going to quit. Everything. Life, I mean. But then I heard you speak, and it stopped me." Henry's heart clenched. "You said, people don't need fixing. They just need to be heard." No one had ever said that to me before. It felt like someone finally saw me. He swallowed hard. "If it weren't for you, I don't think I'd be here." Henry placed a hand gently on the young man's shoulder. "I'm really glad you are." After he left, Henry sat in silence, the words echoing through the empty room. Once, he had wondered if he'd ever mattered again. Now he had his answer. The Infinity Group atrium had never looked like this. Gone were the glossy banners and profit charts. In their place, soft white drapes, warm lights, and a hand-painted sign. One Kindness Day. Claire stepped onto the stage, dressed not as an executive, but as a storyteller. "This day isn't about metrics," she began. "It's about moments." The room hushed. A year ago, I was cold, alone, and more lost than I knew. Then a man I'd never met gave me his coat. It wasn't new. It wasn't clean. But it was everything. Because it reminded me that real kindness doesn't wait until it's convenient. It just shows up. She turned to the easel beside her. Pulling away the cloth revealed the coat, faded, frayed, and framed like sacred art. Beneath it, a bronze plaque read, "One small act of kindness can rewrite a life." That moment didn't just warm my night, Claire said. It changed my life. And today, we honor the man who made it possible. She turned to the crowd. "Henry, will you come up here?" Henry rose. The applause was thunderous. He wore a simple suit, borrowed, but pressed with care. His eyes were soft, his face aged, but peaceful. Claire met him on stage and handed him an envelope. "This belongs to you." Inside, the official deed to his new home. Gasps filled the room. She leaned in with a grin. No more sleeping in trucks. The crowd cheered, but Henry held up a hand. Actually, I have something too. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, warm box. You said this coat changed your life, he said, his voice trembling. But you changed mine. You gave me back my name, my son, a roof and hope. He opened the box. Inside, a silver ring. Not fancy, not loud, but full of meaning. I kept it in the coat's pocket, he said, because if anything was more valuable than that coat, it was you. He dropped to one knee. Claire Langston, will you marry me? A stunned beat. Then she laughed, choked with tears, radiant. Yes, of course, yes. The room exploded in cheers. And just like that, what began on a freezing night with a simple coat became a promise for life. 1 month later, they were married, not in a ballroom, not on a yacht, but at Thomas's place, the little red brick community center that shaped them both. Children made paper flowers. The cake was baked by one of Henry's mentees. The chairs didn't match. But the room? It glowed. Claire wore a simple white dress, her hair loose. Henry wore that same suit. Noah stood proudly beside his father, this time not as a boy, but as a man. Claire took Henry's hands. Once, you gave me a coat, she said. Tonight, I give you my whole life. Her words spilled over the room like sunlight through stained glass. Soft, radiant, unforgettable. Henry couldn't speak, but his tears said everything. As music played and laughter echoed into the courtyard, someone snapped a photo. Henry and Claire beneath the hand-painted sign, Thomas's place. Her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. Beside them on an easel, the old coat. That photo went viral, not because of filters or fame, but because it captured what we all crave. Not perfection, but proof that kindness still matters. Sometimes, the smallest gestures, a coat, a cup of coffee, a kind word, can echo further than we ever imagined. Henry didn't have much, but he gave what he could. And in return, he didn't just change Claire's life. He found his purpose. His son, his home, his heart. Sparkles, this is your reminder. Kindness doesn't require wealth, or degree, or perfect timing. It only requires you. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that hope still lives in unexpected places, please like, share, and subscribe to Midnight English Stories. Because here, we believe every life can be rewritten with nothing more than a little compassion. Until next time, stay kind and keep believing.